Alrighty, hello and welcome everybody. My name is Can and I'm here with Lyngso, and we have a very exciting talk today from Deanna Guliano, who is the nursery director at Grassroots Ecology. And welcome, Deanna. And I'm just going to turn the floor over to you and let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Grassroots Ecology and the fantastic work that you do.
All right, thank you, Can. Hello, everyone. I'm Deanna, and thanks for joining us today. I'm just gonna go ahead and give a little overview of who Grassroots Ecology is, if you haven't heard about us. And today I'm kind of gonna go over growing for local habitat restoration within wild and urban areas. And that's exactly what we do. So the first thing, let's see, I'm trying to get my page. Not working. Just worked a minute ago. Okay, sorry for the little glitch. There it goes. All right, so I just want to give some respect out to the indigenous peoples on which the lands we work on here. California indigenous peoples have been working and managing our wild lands for many, many years, thousands probably. And I just want to give respect to that. So here's my outline. I'm going to just talk about who Grassroots Ecology is for a little bit, give a little background of who I am and where my knowledge comes from, a history of the nursery, because the nursery is kind of the building block of all our restoration, and just kind of want to show you what we do here, and it'll be a nice overview. And then I'm going to kind of go over how we think about goals of restoration for wild and urban sites that we work in. I'm going to give you a little background of some macro communities just to get you thinking how we think when we're designing a new restoration area, and the criteria for our plant selections, and then talk a little bit about habitat gardening with you. And then we've updated our Grassroots Ecology book, San Francisco Bay Area Native Plants for the Garden. And we've really focused on a lot of our local garden-worthy plants that bring in a lot of pollinators. And then we'll go into questions. So Grassroots Ecology is a local 501c3. We were founded in 2016, but we were formerly the stewardship program under Acterra. And Acterra comes from a few different nonprofit organizations that merged back in the 90s, I believe. I can't remember all the history. And it was Bay Area Action and Peninsula Conservation, and that became Acterra. And then we became our own 501c3 in 2016. So our mission statement is to engage and educate the public to restore local ecosystems. And we envision a healthy lands and human communities that sustain one another and are resilient in our changing world. So our big values are our stewardship, hands-on learning, our community, and inclusion. Our focus for these next few years, every 3 years, we do a strategic plan, and it is stewardship engagement. And that's been a little challenging this last, 19 months or whatever with COVID. We've really had a lot of volunteers, community volunteers before then, and we kind of had to cut back on our community volunteer events. And we really focused on interns and high school stewards. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Go to the next. There we go. Here's kind of a big overview of where we work. We have sites all the way from Redwood City down into Los Gatos, or actually Calero. So we're kind of spread out a little bit. A lot of our focus is more in the Palo Alto and Menlo Park area. And a lot of those areas are more of our urban sites, but we have a lot of outlying sites that we work on with Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space and different grants we get from Valley Water District, Santa Clara Valley Water District. And then I'm just going to give you a little background about me. I have an AS in horticulture from Cabrillo College, and my focus was on crop production. And I got that in year 2000. I thought I wanted to be an organic farmer. And then I actually had a chance to do a special studies, and I decided to buy a Jepson manual and do the communities and plants within the plants within the communities in Santa Cruz County. And I got hooked on natives, and I decided I wanted to get a degree in restoration. And so I ended up having to do a lot more classes to transfer, and I got my BA in environmental studies and biology at UC Santa Cruz, and I focused on plant ecology. Then, while I was a student, I got to work at the Arboretum at UCSC, and my focus was on the California native plant collections. And that's where I learned a lot of my propagation techniques and got to hone in on them, because I was had a great mentor with Brett Hall. I was then hired on with the San Francisco Watershed Council, which was an Actera project in 2003. And then I slowly became the nursery manager here. And I also worked for a for-profit nursery in Santa Cruz called Central Coast Wilds, and I was their seed collector. And then I became full-time here in 2005. And yes, I'm still here, and I love it. And it's an amazing, it's been an amazing place to grow and do all this great work. So the nursery, when I came on in 2003, was behind a house in Atherton. It was very small. Even before I got there, it started in 1996 behind one of my old coworkers' house, because they couldn't find local genetics and plants grown for our projects along San Francisco Creek and a Raster Barrow stewardship project we had. So he started growing them in his backyard. And we have slowly moved on. In the winter of 2003, we moved to our present site, which is up in Foothills Park in Palo Alto. There was nothing here at that time. We even had to, the first year, just use the fire hydrant hooked up with different hoses to water. It was quite rustic, and we've kind of moved on and grown a lot since then. So what are some of the projects we do? Well, the nursery grows mostly for our own internal projects, the grassroots projects. I would say 75% of what we do is for our internal projects. 15% is a contract growing with people like Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space and the Santa Clara Valley Water District. And then due to COVID this last year and a half plus, we decided to open our nursery for online sales. So we used to just do twice a year public sales down at Hidden Villa with the California Native Plant Society Santa Clara chapter. And we decided to try this, and it's been a great opportunity for the local community to really be able to get local collections of native plants. We also kind of work with Midpen to do some seed enhancement of rare or uncommon species. This is the blazing star and the Clarkia burri that grow up on Mount Umunum. That is a project I've been working with Midpen for many years, collecting up there on Mount Umunum and then growing the plants. So if you ever get a chance, I highly recommend checking out that top area of Mount Umunum. That's an area that we've been collecting and growing plants for them for many years. Nursery operations. So a big part of what the nursery does is seed collect. We don't buy our seeds from anywhere. I mostly do most of the seed collecting, but my coworkers help too. We do all our propagation here, and then I'll go into our best management practices, which has a whole story in itself. So seed collection, like I said, about 90% of what we grow at the nursery is collected watershed specific seeds. And a few of the hard to grow species I do cuttings of and some divisions. But I try to exclusively use seeds because they have genetic diversity. I collect the species throughout the year. I would say between May and September is the biggest months of seed collection, but we collect all year. I do keep a database for all the seeds I collect with the date, location, how I propagate it. Its whole time it's at the nursery is documented. So I know like when I've upsized things, how I treated them. And yeah, it's really important information that someday could probably be mined for a lot of cool, interesting facts. We store everything, all the seeds here at the nursery in containers in our little office. And then we do a lot of seed cleaning. And I usually don't get to the seed cleaning till I'm ready to propagate everything and sow, as it's just a lot of seed. So we have lots of fun screens, and I have the interns help me do this process as it's pretty tedious. And like I said, most of what we grow is from seeds. So these are some seed flats, and I have a few greenhouses here that I start the seed flats in. I also really love manzanitas and other hard to grow species. So I also do a little bit of cuttings, and I have a misting system. And then some things are really easy from divisions like strawberries and yerba buena. So I'll have division mother flats around. I'm going to go into a little bit about our best management practices for clean nursery production. So let's see, when was it? It must have been about, gosh, maybe even 10 years ago, 7 years ago. It's been a little while. We had a big outbreak of Phytophthora. So most of you have probably heard of SODS, sudden oak death. And that is a type of Phytophthora that is spread through spores in the air. About, like I said, 7 years ago, there was a Phytophthora outbreak, a different type of Phytophthora. It was a root Phytophthora that they found in a restoration site, a large restoration site north of us. And it brought up all these issues of phytophthora in native plant nurseries and restoration work. So everybody kind of got together, pathologists, land managers, nurseries, and we all came up with these new practices to help manage for phytophthora and other diseases. So basically these best management practices, or BMPs, provide an overall outline for producing container grown plants free of Phytophthora species using a systems approach. As a nursery grower, we are responsible for adopting practices that address additional risk factors in grown nursery stock. The interest, like I said, of the BMPs was triggered by this widespread detection in multiple soil-borne Phytophthora species in native plant nursery stock and restoration areas. So we've had to redesign the nursery and have a different flow of containers, and everything is grown up off the ground. We have, you know, when you enter the nursery, we all have to spray our feet with isopropyl alcohol, as this kills any spores of Phytophthora if we're coming in from the field. There's a really huge, this could be a whole nother talk actually. If anyone is interested, I'll have resources at the end and can let you know if you want to know more about this. So our motto is start clean. By using clean components, we basically keep it clean. So it's made our labor more intensive here to think about all these unseen things. It's kind of reminds me a lot of COVID. It's something we can't see, but we manage for. And so that's kind of how we grow all our plants here. So a few things that we think about in our restoration goals when we're starting a new site or at a site that we've been at for many years is we want to improve the biodiversity. And by improving the biodiversity, we're really creating a resilience in our local communities of plants to deal with climate change. And some people talk about moving Southern California plants up to Northern California. And you have to think about it. These plants are, every time they set seed, they are evolving. So they are already dealing with the changing environments. And I'm a big component of staying local. It provides habitat for the native fauna. It helps protect and prevent erosion, provides a carbon sink to remove greenhouse gases, and it improves our water quality for some of our fish and other amphibian critters. And we do have a lot of local rare ones in our area. Setting objectives. It's really important when we're like looking at a site to think about what are we trying to accomplish here. So a lot of times we're restoring disturbed areas, or we're trying to preserve some rare species habitat, creating corridors for fauna. Erosion control is a huge issue, and enlarging our existing sites. And we're providing habitat for birds and insects. On the right is a very old picture. I don't think we even manage this spot anymore. This is along the San Francisco Creek. This was one of my areas I worked on in the early 2000s. And it's down by University Drive. The freeway is really close, but as you can see, it's still a wild area within an urban interface. And it was just a really great little habitat to work on. On the left is a rare species we manage for here in Foothills Park. It's Durca occidentalis, which is Western leatherwood. It only grows in a few areas in the bay. Windy Hill's one of them. Edgewood is one. Where else? I think there's a small little area in Belmont that it grows in. So it's a very special plant. And a lot of times we're just trying to improve habitat for these rare endemics of our area. So why local seed? Why is it so important? Well, collecting locally, we really try and focus on the watershed that we're working in. So we have a lot of sites within San Francisco Creek. So we try and collect specifically just in that watershed. Sometimes we will use the watershed right next to it, which would be Matadera or Adobe Creek. So staying at least within the county, I think is very important, as they're genetically adapted to our local climates and soils. I mean, they've been doing this for many, many years. The native plants have co-evolved with native birds, insects, and other animals that pollinate them. It's resilient. It's going to be resilient for these changing times we're in. And it's resistant to local insect infestations. So now I'm going to kind of go, I just want to kind of get everybody to think about our local macro communities within these. And I'm focusing kind of just on the Santa Cruz Mountains, as that is our area that goes from San Bruno Mountain down to Mount Madonna on the east and west side of those mountains. And I think I have 7 main macro communities, but within these, you're going to get micro climates and micro communities, and you're going to get a weaving of these communities within each other too. But it's kind of nice to think about this, because this is how we go into creating our plant palettes and what species we're going to use in our different sites. So coastal communities are really dominated by low growing shrubs and perennials. They're found along the cooler western slopes of the Santa Cruz Mountains. Their soils are usually really sandy and well drained. So a lot of times the plants have really thick leaves that have adapted to this windy and the soils, sandy soils. And right here is a nice seaside daisy. And then we have our grasslands. Around here, we have a lot of serpentine grasslands. And a lot of times they have really amazing floral displays. Really great place to go for this would be Edgewood Park in the spring. They're dominated by native bunch grasses and wildflowers. And a lot of these native grasslands were very important areas for the native peoples for food sources. A lot of the native bulbs and grasses were used for food. The chaparral areas, these are kind of encompassed in and around our grasslands and can weave in and out of our woodlands. And so these species have really adapted for life in a really dry, open habitat, usually pretty rocky soils, and they really love fire. They have adapted to have fire regimes go through them. The large plant in the back is a flannel bush. We don't have a lot of that super locally. There is some in the Santa Cruz Mountains, very uncommon. It's a little bit more common in Monterey County. Oak woodland. This is mostly what we have. I would call oak woodland and oak savannas on the east side of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and they're dominated by oaks, usually Quercus lobata, the valley oaks, and the coast live oaks. And then they have an understory of shrubs and grassland and a variety of herbaceous plants. Riparian areas. So these are all our little creeks that come in and out and flow into the bay. And they're mostly going to be dominated by willows, dogwoods, sedges, some alders, and some other kind of herbaceous perennials like mugwort and such. But these will go weave in and out of kind of woodland areas or grassland or even chaparral sometimes. And then our mixed evergreen, these are dominated by hardwoods. So those are like your madrones and your bays. And we have a nice picture here of Arbutus menziesii. If you're out in the wild soon, taking a hike, these are just starting to color up and get some nice fruit. So keep your eyes open for those. So what is our criteria for plant selection when we're doing a restoration or an urban site? Well, the first thing I like to do is look at where I am. What is the habitat that's surrounding me? If it's a pretty disturbed area, you might think, okay, what probably was here? So really survey what natives and exotics are there. What type of soil do you have? Is it clay, loam, or sand? This is really going to help you figure out the species you can use in the spot. What type of light do you have? Is it full sun, part shade, or shade? What's your hydrology? Sometimes you have areas that, especially in our habitat work, we have areas that might have seasonally wet meadows or really kind of more seasonally springy areas. The topography is really important. Hillsides, is it going to get a lot of drainage? And then sometimes we can use reference sites that are close. If an area is pretty disturbed, we can use a reference site in nature that'll help emulate this natural system we want to try and accomplish. And what type of habitat are we emulating? And then aesthetics sometimes really comes into view. It doesn't have to be the most important, but some of our urban sites, we kind of think about aesthetics. Like if it's a really public area, we want to encourage people to use natives. So we want to be mindful of the natives we choose in those sites to kind of educate, to get people interested in natives and not thinking that maybe they're not too tidy, which is a little tricky. So again, what is the natural habitat of the species? This is really going to determine its requirements for watering and placement. I like to really group plants as you go into nature and you observe how plants are in nature. You really see that, especially the herbaceous plants and a few of the shrubs, they really kind of group together. And that's kind of how we do this in some of our more urban sites, is we think about, okay, how can we manage these plants together? They kind of have the same requirements, same light, same soils, same water. And then sometimes you want to kind of think about foliage color throughout the year and textures that kind of weave together. And that repetition of colors is very natural in the wildlands. And so you like making swaths of colors and species together. And I always like to use odd numbers because it looks more natural. 3s, 5s, and 7s, especially with like smaller herbaceous natives, like say naked stem buckwheat or something. You want to kind of group 5 or more together, or some grindelia, the gum plants, or the California fuchsias, to really kind of put on a display. And of course, we're always doing habitat gardening. And you want to kind of think about a steady source of food throughout the year. flowers and fruits, so nectary plants and pollen plants. So that's another thing we do when we're designing our plant palettes for our sites, is really having a really diverse palette of plants that are going to be flowering and fruiting throughout the year, so that there is food for our local fauna. Continuous layers of vegetation to attract species of different niches. So this is thinking about trees to shrubs to perennials to maybe herbaceous or ground cover. Thinking about those niches for different birds and insects you're wanting to bring in or help. With perching sites, brush piles, and bare ground. A lot of our native bees are solitary, and they need bare ground to actually live in. They also use old holes in wood. They also, so it's important to have areas like this in our restoration and urban areas we work in. It's a water source is good. And I like to really let the seeds ripen before I prune, because it is food, or sometimes birds use it for nesting. So I wait till the bitter end to do any pruning or deadheading. And some of these pictures are here at the nursery, just to show you that even in the nursery environment, these are all in pots of plants here at the nursery. The juncos usually lay a few different rounds per year. They always seem to find the dense pots of holodiscus or thimbleberry. We get lots of dragonflies. This one is on, I think, an old yarrow stalk. Yeah. Let's see, go to the next. There it goes. We get damselflies too. I've seen at least probably, I don't even, gosh, 5 species of these around the nursery. We get a lot of Chalcedon checker spots here at the nursery that lay their eggs on our bee plant and sticky monkey plants. They just love them. And here's some young caterpillars eating the bee plant. There's the mature butterfly on poppy that seems to come up everywhere in the nursery. I also have some gardens here around the nursery, and I have a lot of yerba santa, and the bumblebees just love it when it's flowering. And then we get the skippers on our California buckeyes. So I'm just going to give a little overview of some of the wild areas that we work in. One of the wild, we do a lot of partnering with city open spaces. We work with the city of Los Altos Hills, and we have been managing Burn Preserve for quite a while. The left picture is a before picture. Teasel really took over this area that I had noticed years ago was all natives before, and the teasel just kind of came in and took over. So we got a grant from Valley Water District, and we worked on removing the teasel and adding in local natives to this area. So the right is what we've done. And it has just been amazing to see the transformation there. Another area we work in is a Raster Darrow Preserve. That's one of our older spots. And we here on the right, we have interns kind of pulling star thistle, which is a really invasive weed in our grasslands locally. And then on the left is how amazing our kind of oak savanna grasslands can be when we just help them out a little bit, even just with weed removal is a huge thing we do. Sometimes we don't plant. We just are removing the weeds and letting the natives have a chance at less competition. Foothills Park, we've been working up here for quite a while. If you're ever up here, we've been working on a lawn conversion kind of area towards the back of the huge lawn they have here. And my focus was, if you've ever been up here, you've seen they have lots of deer, they have lots of turkeys, they have lots of rabbits. And so the rangers were like, here's an area we're not irrigating near the creek, Buckeye Creek. It's a native creek that runs through here and then flows into San Francisco Creek. And it gets super hot and dry in the summer, and it freezes and gets no sun in the winter. So it was a challenge for me, but I had a lot of fun, and we've been working on this probably for a good 15 years. And I just chose a lot of local species, kind of bringing the riparian area out with some like Ribes sanguineum, and which is pink flowering currant, some ocean spray, and then bringing out a more natural meadow with yarrows and California asters and goldenrods and different sedge species that are local, like foothill sedge. And it's been such a great area. It's really fun to watch it evolve. And like I said, this last year and a half plus, we've really focused on high school stewards and interns. And it's been really great because we're being able to teach our young youth how to be in their environment and take care of it, as they are the next generation. So it's been really great. It's been the first year I've had interns at the nursery, and it's been great to teach them how to run a nursery, how to collect seeds, how to clean seeds, how to grow native plants, and just really get them immersed in our local ecosystems. This is a great little picture map of kind of more of our urban areas that we work in around the bay. We have a site up in Redwood City. If you're local to that area, there used to be palm trees. I should have put a picture in. It was full of palm trees and just a huge mess. And we basically, if you ever get a chance to go over there, we've completely redone it. It's by Kaiser, and the native fauna we've seen in there is just incredible. Another urban site we have a bunch of sites along San Francisco Creek in Palo Alto, on the Menlo Park side and on the Palo Alto side. If you go near El Palo Alto Park, I think I have a few pictures. And Redwood Grove in Los Altos is another one of our sites. We also do a bunch of water monitoring as one of our projects, and we've put in rain barrels around the area too. This is the El Palo Alto site. When I first came on in 2003, that was my site, one of my sites I got to work on. It was really fun. It was right there at San Francisco Creek, and it was great to just kind of see it evolve and mature through the years. A new project we've been working on is bioretentions with the city of Palo Alto. And if you go around downtown, it's kind of near, I don't know all the streets very well, but there are bioretentions in the neighborhoods kind of near El Palo Alto. And you can see the work we've been doing. So we've basically been taking out some plants that they had in there, and we're redoing it with natives. And it's just created these great corridors for the native pollinators and birds in the city. And let's see, should be able to. This is kind of one of the corners we've been working on. And you can kind of see the left is kind of a before, where we're kind of taking some of these big non-native grasses out, and then we were replanting with some local poppies and some rushes. Juncus patens is one of them. And I think, what else did we use? I can't remember right now. I think we put some penstemons in there and some California fuchsias. And then another fun thing I've done here at the nursery, sometimes you might not have a lot of space, but I've used old pallets and made a really great little habitat within a pallet garden I have here at the nursery. It's got like strawberries and yerba buena and some alum root and some monkey flower. It was been really fun to watch it evolve and see all the critters that utilize it. And then I guess I'm just going to kind of talk about our book that we've recently updated. And if you're interested in kind of our local flora, this kind of hones it down a little bit more. It kind of breaks it down into annuals and then goes through herbaceous perennials, woody perennials. And with each, we've kind of given the common name, the botanical name, flowering time, the size. We've given the type of habitat it would grow in. We've also given its water requirements, its exposure, and then we try to add some wildlife that would be attracted to it or use it, and then any special notes we can think of. Yeah, and here's one of the herbaceous perennials that are local to the Santa Cruz Mountains. And like I said, we get into the evergreen shrubs. And then a really fun thing we've done too is we've added lists in the back to kind of help out if you're wondering which annuals would do good under dry shade under oaks, or which deciduous shrubs would be good. We also have the 40th easiest to garden plants. And yeah, I think we now also have a fire plant list too. What else? I was going to say too, if people are interested, the California Native Plant Society Santa Clara will be having their fall plant sale October 9th. And we're going to be joining them for that. You also can look at our online inventory to see what we grow. Anything else? I think I kind of sped through there a little faster than I anticipated, but I can leave lots of room for questions now.
Okay, thank you so much, Deanna. So we have some pretty good questions in the chat. So let's go back and start with a question here. Could you explain what a watershed is to us? That's an excellent question. So
yeah, so basically a watershed, I should have put a nice picture in there for you. I'm going to try and explain this well. So if you think about the mountain ranges, they all have creeks that kind of come down and filtrate into either a bay or a larger water system. And so in given areas, you can even type this in to the internet, you know, like watershed and it map, and it'll usually show you a watershed map. So it's basically all the waterways that go into a larger waterway. So these areas, a watershed has basically usually separated by mountain ranges most of the time, topography. So here in Palo Alto, there's actually 3 watersheds. So you get at least the Matadera Creek, which kind of flows in through Barron Park area and down by a Raster Road, and then it flows into the bay. Then you have San Francisco Creek, which has a lot of little tributaries, Buckeye Creek, Los Trencos Creek. They all flow into the larger San Francisco Creek, which then flows into the bay. And then you get Adobe Creek, which starts up near Hidden Villa, and it flows down through mostly Los Altos and then into the bay. So it's really cool to see these cool maps. And that's something I'll have to add if I do this presentation again, is a great map of watersheds. I find it really intriguing. Those are kind of just our local watersheds. But basically it's usually an area that's divided by topography, and their end zone doesn't, where they outflow doesn't flow into each other. So that's why they're more distinct watersheds.
Alrighty, thank you. All right, next question is, how do you create your restoration plans? This person would like to do their own restoration plan for an area in their city, and they're curious about what the steps would be.
Restoration plan. So, well, it's good to know what I mean, that's a hard question. I've been doing this for, oh gosh, I've been here for 18 years. So I have a lot of historical knowledge of kind of knowing habitats. And when we are starting a new restoration spot, we kind of have the knowledge behind us of what species or what habitat we're working in. So it's really important to think about those factors, like where are you? If you're wanting to do it on your own property, it's one thing. I think if you're trying to do something with a city, you might need to bring in a consultant, is my guess. I'm trying to think what else I could add. There are, I mean, we help people. There's also consulting firms that do that kind of work. If you're looking more at watersheds or water areas, those could be a little trickier with permitting too. Water districts are pretty, they have a lot of permitting requirements. So I'm not quite sure where your area is, but you're welcome to email me more specifics if you want, and I can try and help lead you in the right directions.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I know often in the Bay Area, we have so many different microclimates, and trying to put a restoration plan really depends on the topography and what kind of climate you have. So I think there's a little bit of an extensive research that goes behind, and not really one plan fits all.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question is there a difference between an oak woodland and an oak savanna? And if so, is there a good resource for the definitions of the different ecosystems and the vegetation types?
Yeah, great question. So when we think of oak savannas, you kind of think more of an open oak type of woodland. They're kind of tricky terms, but they are a little different. So oak savanna to me means very open. So I'm thinking valley oaks, you know, these big majestic oaks with grasslands underneath. Sometimes they call them even parkland. An oak woodland could be, you know, dominated by oaks, more coast live oaks, you know, and they're not going to be as open and have a lot of meadows or grasslands in between them. So that's the main difference that I kind of see. And yes, you can definitely put it on the internet and there will be a more definitive definition than mine.
Thank you. Next question is, do you catalog what native plants were edible or medicinal for native peoples?
Great question. So my thesis actually at UCSC was doing a small, as I said, I worked at the Arboretum. So my senior thesis was creating a pamphlet on the native plants in the Arboretum garden and illustrating those and giving the native names and uses of those plants I illustrated. I used to, when we did the plant sales, I had tags and for each plant we sold, and they always gave like the medicinal use or the edibility, or a lot of plants were used utilitarian for like basket weaving or different cordage. A really great resource. I've through the years have collected different pamphlets of different tribes in California. And if you want to email me, I can give you those resources. A really great book, if you're really interested, is by Kat Anderson, Tending the Wild. She really gives a kind of overview of all these. I know the Amamutsun locally are teaching their stewards more about our local plants and all their uses. And I think they have a newsletter. You might reach out to them. There is a lot of resources, and I think reaching out to the Native community is a really important thing to do. And I can, again, you can email me and I can give you some of those resources that I have.
Fantastic, thank you. So this is more of a comment and a question all tied in one. So here we go. So not sure if this would be appropriate for any of your sites, but there's a movement to return beavers to creeks in order to increase the water storage of the area. Occidental Arts and Ecology has a campaign about this, and there's a link in the chat. So maybe you can address returning wildlife like beavers back to our watersheds, perhaps.
Yeah, I have been hearing a lot about this, and I don't know if you know about the Searsville Dam thing they're trying to do out of, I think my battery's so low, but I thought I was connected. I'm gonna just turn this on real quick, but I believe, there we go. If you look at the Searsville Dam, it goes through Jasper Ridge here in Palo Alto, which is a Stanford land. They've been trying to open up that for years and let it go wild. It's tricky in some of these urban areas because so much of the creeks have been concreted. So I think you'd have to really pick the right area that could support the beavers, because I think they need a lot of riparian plants to and water to support the way they live. But I think it's a great idea. I think it's just figuring out where they could do the best.
Alrighty. So the book that you had mentioned in your talk, where can folks purchase that book?
Oh, this one, our book.
Yes.
So that can be purchased through, you can email, my email is nursery@grassrootsecology.org. And you can just send me an email. And then I've been just selling them online. And if you don't live very locally and can't pick it up, I'll mail it out to you for the postage. And it's that easy.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so the next question is really important one, I think, and it's sort of a three-parter. So bear with me here.
Okay.
What is the best soil mix for native plant propagation from seed? And do you have any recommendations for how to prepare a garden for planting native plants? And what irrigation practices would you recommend while they get established?
Okay, great questions. Okay, my soil mix for my seed flats is something I make myself. It is 1/3 perlite, 1/3 peat, and 1/3 vermiculite. And that's what I grow everything in. I used to add some mycorrhiza to that mix. And when all the Phytophthora and the best management practices came upon us, some of that product they weren't sure about the sources. So the pathologist was a little nervous of letting us still use it. And I used to use a little bone meal in there too, but I have not done that in the last 5 years or so. And the mycorrhiza come in through the air anyways, and we're trying to upsize and not keep the seedlings in flats very long, so they get good nutrients in our soil mix. So that hasn't been a problem. I think that mix is really great because the peat gives the moisture you need for those seedlings, and the vermiculite and the perlite the perlite keeps it from getting too wet, and the vermiculite always helps a little with the moisture too, but also like an aggregate of air. So that's been my soil mix for the seed flats. Our soil mix, when we upsize to pots, which probably you're not doing, actually comes from Terry. And Terry has worked at Lyngso. She's worked with me for years. I've been kind of evolving our soil mix here, and she makes it a mix for me. It's almost a soilless mix, and it's perfect for the natives. It's got a slow release. I use the diesel compost she uses in there. I use the now it's all redwood that I use, perlite and the lava rock, and that's it. And the plants love it. The natives love it. And it's, like I said, the turkey's a nice slow release because you don't want to pump up the natives. They're used to low nutrient soils around here. So if you pump them up with too much nutrients, they're going to kind of bomb out after a while and not be as long lived, I find. So preparing your beds, let's see. Sometimes it's nice just to help them get established. We're coming into the planting season. The best time to plant natives is fall. We usually like to start with the first rains, and let's hope we get some rain soon. Fall through February is our planting season. And the natives really like that because they really need to get their roots established. And I always tell people to be really patient with the shrubs and trees. They really need, like I said, to get their roots established, and that can take them up to 3 winters. And you might not see much growth until those roots are established with the shrubs and trees. But the perennials will, and the herbaceous stuff will establish much faster. So preparing your garden beds, I think the most important thing is, you know, do you have gophers? So we often use gopher wire baskets for our trees and shrubs because they are long-term, they live long, we want to protect them. We can't go for basket everything. Sometimes we'll use a little bit of handful of compost when you're planting, but that's it. Depending on where your plants are coming from, they should be, like I said, pretty healthy, and like the natives don't need a lot of nutrients. Irrigation, that's all up to you. I find that drip irrigation is really nice, but it needs a lot of maintenance, and I tend to be pretty busy, and so I tend to hand water a lot of our gardens here at the nursery, or have a sprinkler and do a deep watering. But once your natives are established, depending on the types you're using, a lot of water is not going to be needed, you know, say 3 to 5 years. I hope that answered some of those questions.
Absolutely. And to follow up on that, what about mulching while you're planting?
Yes, mulching super important. So a lot of our restoration sites that are really heavily weedy, we definitely do a lot of sheet mulching. That's how we start, because it's just kind of a lot of labor to try and weed everything. So we do a thick sheet mulching that we try and do that summer before we're going to plant in it in the fall. And yeah, mulching is an excellent, I like using McClellan's usually has a lot of mulch locally for us, just from the local oaks here. Try not to use things like eucalyptus that might have oils in it that might deter growing of plants. So yeah, oak mulch is really pretty primo. Yeah, mulching, or even if you don't sheet mulch, just mulching kind of around the plant you're planting to kind of help keep the moisture in, get it established as not to have bare ground. I've even used hay, straw for mulching in my garden at home, like with my vegetables. I really like straw too.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So, you know, I think we pretty much addressed a lot of the questions here, and thanks, Deanna, for the fantastic answers and the presentation. I'll ask you a question. If there is one key takeaway that you want folks to retain from the presentation, what would that be?
Wow, that's a big question. Key takeaway. I would say get out in nature and really observe what's around you. You can learn so much from just taking a hike or a walk and be in the moment. I find that that's how I learn the most, is just being in the present and observing. And I feel like we can be taught a lot from our environment.
That's well said. That's fantastic. Thank you so much again for a wonderful presentation. And I'll share the links for the Grassroots Ecology and the book links and the resources. I've already shared them via chat, but I'll go ahead and email the folks that attended today the copy of the presentation, and this will be uploaded on our website as well. And once again, thanks everybody for attending, and especially thank you, Deanna, for a fabulous class.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. Take care, everybody.